So the course, as you can see, introductory course in theoretical phonetics and grammar, will start today with general notions because it's the first lecture, and we're going to speak about the systemic conception of the language. Because so generally to start describing anything, we should give some definition, some understanding of what it is, describe it according to some general parameters, and then we'll be able to somehow speak about that in details. Yeah. And as you can see here, we shall speak about some system as usually. It's not the first year that we speak about the language as a system because it is a useful metaphor to describe the language. Nowadays, it is maybe the most appropriate one, not maybe to the full degree we can describe with that term and understanding the language because it is a living being, it's changeable and flexible, and any system presupposes that it is, if it is, so the system created deliberately for some purposes, then we speak about something that is limited and contains limited number of elements. So it's not applicable to the language, and we'll speak today why and what to do with that. So then, as you can see, the language as a system, constituent parts of language and the layers of it, the plane of content versus the plane of expression, the speech and language, paradigmatic and syntagmatic relations. So all that in respect of grammar and phonetics, so we'll find our place in that system because when we speak only about grammar and phonetics, it means that we omit something else, some other elements. So it is a limited description of the language as a system. So we are interested only in some aspects of it, not the whole unit. The whole, yes, so the whole unit, I mean, the whole entity, not unit, of course, because language it's something more than a unit. Though units, they can be, of course, of different sizes as well, but they are comprised by the system. Yes, and language is a huge system comprising different types of units, from the smallest ones to the biggest ones. So, language as a system, we start with this. Uh, well, first of all, to start about main concept here to describe in terms of the system, we should remember that the system term itself, it's not a new one. It was used in ancient times. Uh, so prehistoric times, yes, by Plato, before Plato, by Stoics and the different types of schools on language, and in fact, they were called grammar, but they presuppose that it is language. They didn't differentiate at those times separately phonetics, grammar, stylistics, and so on. Yeah, because the term system was used like a structure of something, and then it was developed, really developed in the 19th century. Just imagine. So the term itself was used in ancient times. Well, I don't know, Pythagoras used, yeah, and so on, mathematicians, but they described really limited something, unity of something, and uh, composition of those units and definite things. They couldn't denote a lot of things, like in language, we use one word, but we can ascribe the meaning, several meanings, yeah? Sometimes it's even difficult to decide which one. We need the context to understand what is meant, because the form of the word could denote, could comprise different content. So for that reason, language, it's a little bit different. But as I mentioned, the term was used, the system, it was used in ancient times, but not with regard to the language. With regard to the language, it started to be used only in the end of the 19th century. So long, long, long centuries of science past and of science development past when the term appeared in respect of language, and to be even more precise, it was used in the 20th century because so it appeared in the end of the 19th century in the conception of Ferdinand de Saussure, the Swiss scholar, but it was used in the meaning of structure. In fact, that's what we mean nowadays as the structure, and as the system. It started to be used only with the appearance of IT. The first appearance of IT technologies is closer to the mid of the 20th century. So, returning back, it was used firstly with regard to the math. And of course, some linguists consider why we start using that term to describe language, um, because language, it is also math, but linguistic. Why? So because we operate while using language by some specific concepts in our mind, those which express in very abstract understanding relations between objects and ideas in reality. So we structure it first in our mind, and only then we give the name. You see? So then grammar, it is the math of language, because grammar gives logics to what we are going to say. So put in the positions. What I mean. So we have some substances and some actions. It's very, very abstract. And then when we see in reality something, we refer it to the substance, sorry, so late, early morning, you see. So I'm a late bird. I'm not like to give lectures at that early hour, but okay, what to do? We have such a timetable. Well, and we refer it to the substance, and then we search the name, or we give the name according to the rules of language of substances. So we can use the noun, or we can use the pronoun, or we can use the adjective. Yes, or we can use the numeral, because they are all considered to be the names, the substances, because they can express quantity, or they can express quality of the substance, or they can express the substance itself. And then, okay, again, we classify what we want to express. If it is quality, then we look for something in the language that is built according to the rules of grammar already as adjectives. So they should have some definite form that looks like an adjective, you see? So that is the most general conceptions that we have in mind. They are called categories. And according to these categories, generally, these categories, they are universal for the math, for the language, for arts, or whatever you take. Yes, that is why they refer to the subject and to the object of philosophy, because philosophy learns and studies um, and describes the relations between objects, ideas, the actions, and so on. So that is the abstraction. That is why philosophy is not an easy matter. You should practice, and then it will be, of course, easy. You should practice thinking. That is philosophy, yes, that you should always think about the ideas, about the universals, about the relations between everything, and then you can express your theory. Yeah, you can give your theory, of what is in the world. That is why we have a lot of philosophers who practiced thinking from early ages, and then they became philosophers. Yeah. Well, for us, we're not philosophers, but for example, we are linguists and philologists. We also should practice, but not thinking, yes, all the time logically, thinking about the logics of language. That is, practice grammar a lot, yes? And then when you practice grammar a lot, you can have limited number of words that you know in the foreign language, for example, in our case, the English, or in your native language. But as far as you practice using them all the time, for example, you are a writer, you are a poet, you make your skills more and more elaborated, more and more powerful, yes, more and more effective. So you can notice that because it's like math, you also should yeah, use these formulas, but language formulas. And then you will notice one day how skillful you are. Because so scientists, they prove that to be skillful enough to become a professional, you should repeat one action as many times as 10,000. You see? So it concerns any sphere, whether you speak, whether you write, whether you create some poems and so on, you should repeat, repeat, repeat. And after 10,000 times, you will be a professional. It concerns sports, it concerns arts, I don't know, whatever you like, yes? That reason when somebody says to me, for example, that you can learn language in 2 months or in half a year or in a year, I cannot believe that never is because I know it's impossible. And I know that you need around 10 years to obtain some language. It's minimum. 5 years for generally learn what it is, the words, grammar, practice, try and speak and try and write, but you won't be that skillful yet, you see? And then 5 years to polish every day your language, yeah? And once you stop, you should start again. You know, it's like training in sports. You stop running, for example, and in a month's time, you feel when you come on running, you feel how difficult it is. So you should again take your form. The same with the language. So the main concept here, once we speak about theoretical grammar and theoretical phonetics, it means that we're going to speak a little bit more in abstract terms because theory, it is something that gives explanation to another discipline, for example, in our case, yeah? So that is why we could have a lot of theories. We passed with you the stylistics of the English language, and we spoke then during that course that we don't have one interpretation that is correct for everything, you see? Because we have as many interpretations and of one and the same, for example, text as we have us in number. Yeah, so for example, if a class consists of 30 students, so then we have 31 yes, as many as 31 interpretations together with the teacher, because all those minds, they reconstruct what they read, this reality, textual reality, in their own way, a little bit differently, a little bit more emotional, less emotional, more of experience, less of experience, more of background, less of background, and so on. So for that reason, you could find as many grammar books, as many wanted to write about that. That is why one grammar book of the English language differs from another grammar book of the English language. Practical grammar, I mean that you should, the rules where they are prescribed and you just follow these rules, yeah? So These practical grammars, they are different. Just make an analysis and you will see that in one grammar, such construction treats that this element is the subject of the sentence, and another group of authors, they write about the same sentence that this element is the object of the sentence. You see? So even this category is very, very important for the sentence, especially of the English language, when we speak about the order of words within the sentence, they can be so different, you see, because they have different vision of language and different functions of those elements, and that's all right. Then, if practical grammars, those that prescribe us what is correct in grammar and how to use, so give us this list of formulas that we should use, like in math. Yeah, so we learn the formulas, and then we go to the exam and we have some practical task. And we, by keeping in mind all those formulas, we just perform those tasks and solve the tasks. The same in language. We keep all the formulas of grammar, and then we just use that to create some text, message, and so on. Well, so then we speak about the system, which contains elements, which has some structure and function. Yeah, so just a second, we'll describe a little. So once we speak about the system, usually we mean those elements, but they are connected together. So everything is not just a separate element. Just as a metaphor for you, I have taken this picture of kaleidoscope. I suppose you all have had that experience of using that magic thing to my mind, because it's so creative. You never know, or you never see the same picture collected out of a limited number of elements. Yeah. So if we have a look inside of kaleidoscope, we will notice that we have really limited number of elements. That is the system, by the way. So kaleidoscope, it is a system, and very nice exemplification of the system, because here we have the element. They have some structure. So you see, so when you collect them here, they have some positions, yeah? And you see that they have different forms. We can somehow mm, classify them, for example, by colors. Yeah. So classification, it is when we choose, give some parameter, and according to this parameter, we separate the elements. Yeah. Try to find some order, to make an order. The same in language. It's very important because our mind cannot stand disorder. I mentioned to you about that during the previous courses, when we also touched upon the system, and we spoke with you that when our mind cannot find the logics, cannot give these parameters and classify and make an order in everything, okay, so our mind considers that it is something not clear, not understandable, and can be refused. And me, as the linguist and philologist, while learning the foreign language, I cannot learn by just hearing the word, hearing the sentences, not even the word, and even the word, even in English, it's not even the language that I do not know and trying to learn. Even the English, when my children uh, ask me to translate something and they mispronounce, of course, because they are not that skillful in English as me, and then they mispronounce, I cannot figure out what it is. I want them to show me, because under the sounding, it can be different things. It can be several words, one word. It can be like a fusion in pronunciation of the sounds, deliberate because it is, for example, colloquial. So without the context, for me, it's impossible. I cannot. For me, it's very important to see the word. Then my mind can decide, if I don't know that word, whether it is noun, adjective, whatever, yeah, and during within the context, I can figure out then the meaning. at least vague meaning, yeah, if I don't know the word. So the same here. We have, that is because language has the structure. So what it means? It means that each element takes its a clear position. For example, the adjectives, the verbs, and so on. Yeah. So here it is, for example, green color, red color, yes, violet, and so on, and we can classify. So then we put them here, and we can have each time turning this base of that kaleidoscope. Yeah, we can receive different ornaments, but each time they are different. You see, they're never the same. Why is that so? We have such a limited number of elements, but each time they are collected, yes, while we turn in different positions, they are fixed, yeah, and stopped. And then we have, of course, different ornaments. The same in language. Language is very flexible in that respect, and any user of that language can try his or her hand in creating something specific. That is why the more we practice using language, the more skillful we are. And you know, some people, they can't speak. They can't speak because they do not, they're just not skillful enough because of lack of this competence. They do not drill their language, yeah? And so once you learn another language or even your native language, and you want to be creatively and successfully impressive, yeah, so then you should practice speech oral and speech written speech, yes, because these are different parts of our mind that are in charge of those creativities, yeah? And that is why it's important to drill both. It's not enough just speak or just enough write. Sometimes people, they have writing better than speech and vice versa because they practice something more, you see? Well, for example, for me, it's always writing is better, always. First of all, so general because of my individual skills that I'm slow in my yes different cognition processes. I'm not that quick. That is why I read not very quick. I read it slow because I should figure out everything, connections, and so on. And that is just peculiarity. It's not good or bad, but I write always very nicely at the best level possible because of this slowly I you can just sit down and take my time, fix my mind, concentrate and write skillfully, you see, by collecting all the synonyms I know about that phenomena and use them creatively. But once I need to speak, it's really a struggle for my mind compared to writing. But it's my individual. That's what I mentioned. That is why I never phone without any urgency, you see. And I don't like when I'm phoned by phone. It's better for me to write a message. That is more comfortable for me. It's my peculiarity. Some people, vice versa, they prefer just to call because their speech is practiced a lot from the early years of their childhood, and yes, they are just more skillful. And some people, they do both. So yes, you see, they have both skills developed. Well, so that is the metaphor that we use. And I wanted to stop here once more. Then I mentioned to you that we speak about language as a system. And within the system, we speak about elements. It's in general terms a collection of something. But once we give some parameters of classifying, so these are elements. These are elements, they are not units. They are elements because they are just, okay, nothing to do with this kaleidoscope now. It's just elements that are on the table. It's not a system yet. But once we take them and decide to put them inside of this base to create something, then we understand that we should, for brighter picture, we should use colorful elements. And for monochrome picture, we should use some, for example, of some color, but of different shades of these color elements. And then it means that we consider that they, while communicating, while dealing together inside of this basement, they will create all together some picture. So that is the function of this. Then these elements are considered to be, that is the final result of each element separate, taken together and composing and functioning together as one picture. Because separately, these are just elements. Together, they are already units put down here, because we give them the function to express some definite color. For example, we need more of red or more of green, of white, or we can change this, yeah, to whatever we like. For example, if it's monochrome, then we do in some different manner. So we give these elements the function of units. Unit, it is something meaningful, plus it has its own function. For example, to express the color in this, yes, simplified version of the system. Then we need, if it's a colorful picture that we need, then we take of different colors, choose the yes, concentration of each of the color desired, and then we receive the function, because the system, it's always one function final of all the elements. So each element separately has its own function and meaning, but playing together, they compose one function for them all. That is why it is a system. In this respect, it is already a system and not the multitude. Multitude, it's just collection of elements, just collection. For example, a pen bag, a collection contains a collection of pens, pencils, I don't know, eraser, and so on. It's not a system, you see? Well, but for example, a kit for, I don't know, for an architect to draw some, yeah, to make some sketches for the project, it's already a system of, for example, elements or tools to be used to make, for example, some sketches or some yes, graphic presentation of the project. Then it is already a system. So when you buy these kits for math, for example, and so on, because they function together by realizing the some graphic elements. Okay. Well, so let's move. Then, if we speak about language, we have some elements until we have stratified them as units, and we have ascribed them some qualities, functions, and so on. For example, here you can see general language as a system comprising elements. But once we classify those elements that could have some structure, and we refer them to nouns or to verbs or to adjectives, that means that we make some relations between these words. Yes, so then it is already an element with a structure. It's a unit with a structure, sorry. And in relation to other words, this unit takes the position within the system as a language as a system, for example, the position of the noun, the position of the adjective, and so on. And that means that language has a structure, because we have these links and relations between different units already, once we have ascribed some function. So, and altogether, why it's a system? Because we realize the function of communication. It is the most important function. Well, so then, as you can see, the language, we should give the definition. You remember at the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned to you that we should before speaking about grammar and phonetics in general, about anything in this world, we should understand what it is. Yeah, so we should give some definition. Now, after I have explained you why we use the term system, nowadays it is the most useful metaphor. We haven't found, I mean, the scientists, we haven't found anything more useful. I think in future there will be something, yes, another that more suitable to describe the language, but that works for this level of our understanding of the world, works all right, okay, enough to be used. And so then we consider that the language is a complex semiotic system consisting of several subsystems. So in the most general terms. So why semiotic? Because words, these are conventional units. Conventional is when we have agreed between each other as the users that this word will denote this thing. And that is why, as far as we have these communities, and they are not it's not a global agreement. So we have some regional peculiarities of the words. You see, for example, when you learn English for many years, and then you go to the United Kingdom or to the USA or to Canada, and you hear this speech and you cannot understand what it is because you do not know the meaning, which is ascribed but to these words. The words are clear to you, you know them, but you cannot figure out the meaning because they express something different within this group of people. For example, Americans or English people, yeah, or for example, Canadians, Australians, and so on. So in each group, they could have some additional meaning ascribed to the same form. Yes, so you hear or you read, it looks familiar, but it has another meaning that you learned from the dictionary. That is why it is semiotic, because words, they are just signs within behind which we can find different meanings, you see. And for example, nowadays it's very popular in the Ukrainian language to use some authentically historical words, maybe, yes, to avoid, to preserve, first of all, ecology of the language, and to avoid, for example, the influence of other languages, Slavonic languages that have the same structure, for example, and maybe because of our historical background of being within another country for many years. So of course, we feel that influence, and by trying to avoid that and maybe to make our language more authentic and more original and more unique, we try to recollect some old forms that were used in the language and implement them. And for many members of the society, these words, this form, old-fashioned or maybe really already forgotten by centuries, they are not clear. So they should have some instruction what it is, how it should be used, and so on, because they didn't learn that during the school years when we all have some basic knowledge, yeah, to receive. So that is why it's semiotic system, because we can at any time ascribe or invent some new word to already existing meaning. Yeah, so we have some meaning and we have some form popular and used by everyone. And then, so we have agreed one day that we do not use this word, but we should use this word instead of that one. And it needs some time because, okay, if the society is not a small community, yeah, it's big, then, okay, to be used by all the members of the community, we need some time. Well, so then, of course, if we speak about theoretical course, which we have, we should speak about more academic version of presenting the ideas, and we should start with the history when grammar and phonetics generally they appeared to exist as scientific discipline. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we should mention that the term language wasn't used. It was the word grammar that was used, but in the meaning, that is what we were talking about uh, previously, that language is a semiotic system. We ascribe to the form some meaning and we can change. Yeah. So previously, the word grammar was used um, uh, to express the ability to write, that is the ability to use the language. You see? So it was used in the meaning of language, not grammar in the understanding that we have today, that it concerns the rules of using and composing units together. Yep. So no, it was used, the term grammar was used in the meaning of language and some systematic, already first systematic uh, description of a language was as far as you see, it is the fourth, the which one it is 19th yes, 19th century AD, so BC, before Christ era, so as far away and up to the 19th century. Just imagine, it's really not that long history of theoretical grammar. You see, it's just in the started in the middle of the 19th century, but more closer to the beginning of the 20th, in fact, because the work of Ferdinand de Saussure was published in the beginning, in the 2013, by his students. By the way, he's the most cited author in linguistic works, but he didn't publish his work. You see, he even didn't know that he could be so popular. Ferdinand de Saussure. It's because of his students who listened to his lectures, and then they collected their notes and published as the work of Ferdinand de Saussure, and it was the first description of the language as the system together with the structure, the first usage of the term system to language. Okay, and yeah, so who was the first to speak about the language systematically? A little, in our understanding, what we mean now as the system, it was Plato, because first he ascribed, he spoke about the soul that we have in objects, and we should recognize, should perceive, cognite the soul of each object. And once we know the soul already, dusha, yeah, so then we can reproduce the soul in forms, you see. So we do not learn language as forms. Yes, as at school we are learned. Okay, we write a lot. We learn the rules of how to write. Yes, and we write a lot. We practice the form. And Plato told us that first we should know the soul of everything, of each item, of this plant, of this tree, of that stone, and then we can reproduce, by remembering, our memory can reproduce this soul as many times in the form as we want. So form means nothing, and that's right. Yeah, in modern version of what we understand, that language is a sign. So words, they are signs. So without knowing the content of the word, we cannot reproduce or use it. It's useless. You see. So when you see some collection of letters and you do not know what it means, you won't use it, you won't recognize it in speech because you don't know what it is. What is the soul of that word, you see? So Plato was the first, and he so taught that all the objects, they could be, in most general terms, either nouns, so names, yeah, of course, he didn't use the term noun at that time, or the verb, yes, so they can be substances and can be actions. That is what it is, so nouns and verbs, in fact. Then, this conception was a little bit elaborated by, of course, Aristotle. Uh, he was the student of Plato, and he said that, okay, so the soul is good. Once we have known the soul, we should know how to combine these souls together in order to speak. That is the main problem. Yeah, when we learn language, for example, foreign, we struggle a lot at the initial level because we cannot speak. So when we learn the words and what to do with this list of words, we cannot speak. Yeah. So that is the problem. So because we speak and we think and we communicate, exchange our communication, yes, it's exchanging of our ideas in our mind with, of course, with the purpose to receive some feedback on what we have created, yes, in the form of the text. Well, so then he spoke about logos. Logos in our modern understanding, it's sentences. So he was the first to mention that, yes, the soul is good and we should for sure learn the soul of each object of reality, but then we should somehow combine them. And he mentioned that, well, here it is, when we combine, then nouns and verbs, so the names and actions, they play the essential role. Without them, we cannot build up a sentence or express our thought. But of course, it's a modern, he wrote in a little bit different terms, but it's modern interpretation for you to clearly understand his conception. Okay, so Stoicism, the scholars of that school, they offered a little bit elaborated conception of Plato plus Aristotle, and they spoke about logos and types of them. Well, here we should also speak about more or less of that period, but the other part of the world. So it is Panini, a grammar of Panini. It's Sanskrit grammar. You learned, yeah, during our previous courses with Natalia Petrovna. You of course learned, I suppose, that story about and that value of his grammar for general sciences. Why? Because, okay, so Plato, Stoicism, yes, so these about Europe and Africa that are close together, and Panini is about India. And then at that part of the world, they had also more even elaborated grammar book, so the book of language, but called grammar. And at that time, because they had classified already the parts of speech of the language and described the sentences in that book. But why we speak here a little bit later, because after, yes, Plato and European schools of grammarian schools, because it was found only in the 19th century. And after comparing Panini's grammar with old grammars, European and of Arab world, the scientists noticed, okay, the languages, they have something in common. And Panini's grammar is like conceptions of Plato, of Stoics, of Aristotle, and so on, though they, of course, didn't communicate. And before that, of course, scientists were sure that the science was developed only within the limits of Europe and the African countries that close to Europe, you see? So just imagine the level of awareness about the science. Yeah, it's magic because so generally, when some conception appears in even modern conception appears, so you're never sure that somebody's mind has also already invented this conception, and then you can read and be amazed at some scientific work that um, describes the same what you have thought about. It's magic, you see, but it gives us the idea that we are all human beings and have some universal rules of thinking, and of using, for example, languages or other ideas according to. So you should learn philosophy very nicely, because philosophy gives explanation to everything, and according to the rules of categories. Yeah, so we all have the same categories. They are universal. That's why we are thinking more or less in the same manner. Well, so of course, that is what I mentioned about Africa, not, of course, simply because just to enlarge the geography of science, but because there was the Alexandrian school. They worked in the first century very productively, and they just made a logic to all those ideas of Plato and Aristotle, and they offered already the division into the parts of speech. So I suppose you know that the largest library in the world, it is the Alexandrian Library, which is in Egypt, yeah, and so I highly recommend you to visit it if you have a possibility, uh, because not only pyramids that are very impressive, this library is really impressive, being the hugest library in the world. I would like to visit, of course, not yet. I didn't have such an opportunity in the previous years, but I have had an opportunity, yes, still, because my life still continues. So I hope I could be able. Well, so then about traditional grammar with to speak, yeah. So we could speak about the representatives of ancient Greece and Rome, and you see the names of Dionysius, Strax, Protagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Varro, and Priscian, who are maybe the most prominent in language description in terms of scientific approach, the way we understand it now, though this approach as an approach scientific appeared only, as I mentioned, in the 19th century. But the roots of it and the precondition to the appearance of theoretical subjects of science and language in particular. So they were as far as that. So Dionysius Thrax, he was the first to present a comprehensive grammar of the Greek language. Then it was implemented into the Latin language, which in its turn was the main language of science within Europe for many, many centuries, up to the 16th century. Just imagine the influence of Latin to the language of education and of science up to the 16th century in Europe. And afterwards, so we'll speak after which period, so it was the period of enlightenment in literature, for example, in arts and in the world. When Immanuel Kant said that yes, if I think that I exist, that is because I think in my own language, and I exist within my own language, and it means that it's not Latin one, the language of science and education, but the language of the country you live in, and then the grammars, national grammars, started to appear, not before the 16th century. So it was this, so the period of preparation, that long period of preparation. So within this period, we speak. So what is comprehensive grammar? That is that we consider in language and in our respect. It's grammar, of course. Now we understand that we speak about the theoretical grammar. We speak about two basic units. These are logos, the sentences, and the words, the souls, yeah, that we learn. Well, and now, of course, within grammar, we speak about what? We speak about morphology and syntax. So that's why the precondition to such understanding. Well, and of course, Maris logos, these are the division into parts of speech, 8 of them classically. They still, just imagine the influence of Latin, of Greek, and then it was in Latin, and then Latin influenced English, of which we're speaking today, and we still have the same division. The languages are different. So the Greek differs from Latin, and Latin differs from the English language, at least in respect of the articles, because the English they are in Latin they are absent, but nevertheless, you see, onoma, noun, rema, verb, metoshe, participle, afron, article, article because in the Greek language it was, you see, so then it was applied to the Latin, it was reduced but substituted by interjections. Well, antonymia, pronoun, prothesis, preposition, epirema, adverb, and syndesmos, conjunction. Well, so still everything, nothing has changed according to these categories, yeah? So general principles of division of all the words of this collection in kaleidoscope, of language kaleidoscope, elements, stratifying them within the parts of speech. Sometimes we struggle to stratify because we cannot find the place. Why? Because this is the influence of that old period. They have invented 8 categories, 8 parameters, and according to these parameters, the Greek language worked. Then they tried to apply the same categories and the same understanding about these categories to the Latin, a little bit, yes, like procrastination, you know, so you should put and adjust. Even if this element is not adjustable, you should press it and put it into this basket of elements because, okay, it looks like, although it has a little bit different parameters, additional maybe, or lack of some parameters, but we press it into this basket because there is nothing similar in other baskets. You see, maybe we should invent some additional basket for such elements, but because of that influence, linguists usually prefer to leave it as it is, because it's very difficult to find another category and to describe it, to create this another basket for the elements. You see, it's difficult. So, and then it influences through centuries our understanding of the language. That is why this metaphor of language as a system will live for a long time, because okay, because of limitations of our mind. You see, we are limited uh, in uh, in terms of understanding, in terms of procedures of reasoning, of thinking. There are several of them. If you learn properly philosophy, you will understand that we deal only with 2 major principles. First, we collect items and then we make the rule for them. So find some logics for them if they are unknown for us. And once we have invented that rule, then we apply this rule. So we have found some new object. Okay, we take a list of rules that we have created and we try to put this element to according to some rule, you see? So, and that is why this is inductive and deductive reasoning, two types of them that we deal with, and analogous thinking by analogy. Okay, if this element uh, looks like this one, okay, by analogy, they are all the same. We put them into one basket, you see? That is how easily and elementary our mind functions. And that is why we have these 8 parts of speech still, because it's very difficult to invent something else. Well, and that is why these theories are so precious for us through centuries, because we still use the same ideas. And because we are limited in our, unfortunately, reasoning, yes? So once it was invented, we can't invent something else. Well, so then also it's about the school of Alexandrian school, and there, of course, meaning and value for the development of science and grammar and language. And of course, Christian grammar, where we have 8 word classifications already generalized, you see, generalized and laid out in a manuscript. Because before this, so you should understand that Plato didn't write grammar rules or whatever, that it is grammar or language. No, these were works, these were um, discussions of the characters invented by Plato. It was Socrates usually who, by communicating such a composition created by Plato, in which we have a dialogue between 2 people communicating. And one person puts the question, what do you think it is? And the other person answers, okay, I think it is a stone. Why do you think it is a stone? Because it has some soul of a stone, you see? Something like this. So then, of course, by reading these Plato's works and Aristotle's works, we collected these ideas as with reference to, for example, science. So you should understand that it's not that easy also was. That is why it's a long story about the development of the scientific history, because this was not like purely scientific work. No, this was the dialogue between the invented characters about the world and about the language. Well, so then, so the value of Princeton was that he described 8 classes of words, the parts of speech that we have, and Thrax developed and elaborated in his grammar regarding the Latin language, and with the omission of the article and interjection because, okay, they were not in the Latin. Well, and the next step in the huge understanding of generally that we should speak about not Latin, but we should speak about native languages. It was given by Antoine Arnaud and Claude Lancelot in the 17th century. And of course, they wrote about the French language, but nevertheless, they created the ideas first concerned the French language, but they created English grammar, and it was the first grammar about the English language. That is why we speak here. But what they expressed in their grammar, they expressed the idea that all the languages, they have the universals. They have this something in common. They are all the same. That is why we speak about the language and describe it. And then we can apply to any original language, you see? So, for example, all languages, they have some signs to express substances and actions, and they are combined to create sentences in all the languages. Yes, and so on. So they spoke about universals And that is was the beginning already of, that is why we speak about the parts of speech, that they are in any language to describe what it is, the part of speech, and then we just take the any language and classify all the words according to those definitions, those 8 baskets, yeah, that I mentioned to you, like metaphorically, about the parts of speech in which we put all these elements and give them the quality already of units, not just elements. Elements are just collection of something. You see, on the table you see different colors and you put them in kaleidoscope. But once you put them and you choose how many of red, how many of blue, how many of white, or you avoid something, so then you have some purpose, some final function of those elements. And when they have already acquired some function to express blue color, white color, red color in your kaleidoscope, in your future picture that you are trying to create with these colors, then they're already units, for example, of this system. And finally, they will create altogether, communicating with each other, some picture, some ornament. Well, so the 8 parts of speech, modern, yeah, you can see here, nothing okay, new for you and me. While learning practical grammar, you learn the same, absolutely the same. So you can take the practical grammar. My favorite ones, of course, are practical grammars of Kaushanskaya. Yeah, okay, Kaushanskaya, I like, so they all criticize this book for being old-fashioned, but you are a philologist. You need not elementary words. You need deep understanding of language. And Kaushanskaya created magically grammar. In which respect? Because the manual for practice. So the rules are okay. Rules can you learn in any grammar. For example, I prefer the rules from Gordon Krylova. So these authors, they are the best. They give very, very deep knowledge of the English grammar. But Kaushanskaya, okay, also in some parts, in some topics, but they are different. They treat differently some parts of speech and some functions of language. As I mentioned, they have different visions. So in Kaushanskaya, it is the subject. In Krylova, it is the object of the sentence. But okay, in avoiding that, Kaushanskaya have prepared the examples for practice from literature. It's very, very important because you feel the language, you feel the culture, you learn, yes, a lot of unknown words, but what to do? Literature, it is the highest competence. You see, people who can create texts that are fascinating and have become classical texts, they are really with magic skills. You see, not all of us can create a really nice text. And that is why I adore this practical grammar. But then when we speak about theoretical grammar, which we cannot start speaking about without knowledge of the practical grammar, of course, because first of all, we should understand what this language is. And then we can think about why it is described to give our reasons. So that is what theoretical grammar deals with. It's not about prescription, it's about description, what we have in this language and our ideas, why we have this situation in this language, and in the other language we have a little bit different situation. What's the reason? And by learning theoretical grammar, theoretical phonetics, and so on, you understand not only one language, you understand generally how languages function. And that gives you the, okay, the, so generally it drills your analytical skills. It's good already. You see, you won't struggle in your old ages of Alzheimer or I don't know some diseases. Yeah, first of all, and secondly, of course, so generally good to drill your analytical skills, to be clear in communication, to be kind in communication, pleasant in communication, and so on. But and of course, for us as a philologist, it is useful because we can understand the English language better. So now we move to a little bit German grammarians. So why do we speak only about grammar? You see, because phonetics, it appeared later in time after understanding general what language is, and under the term language, instead of term language, people used the word grammar. That is why today we speak mostly about this term. But you should understand that we mean language, still language, not the theoretical grammar, in fact. And of course, so the German scientists and scholars, they did a lot of things for grammar. And from the history of the English language, so all the rules about different shifts in pronunciation and grammar and so on, they bear the names of the German scientists and scholars. That is because in the 19th century, they started comparing languages and invented some universals. Okay, so what is important here, that vocabulary and grammar were separated. So that is the beginning of the theoretical grammar already, because lexicology and grammar, the rules of using the words. And here it is. We speak about the Kantian categories. That is the priority that is given to thinking that I mentioned. Yeah, Kant said that once we think, then we exist. It means that we perceive everything through the language. And this language is our native language, first of all. And he, being a philosopher, also he gave, of course, described the categories according to which we classify everything in general, everything what we see and perceive in any sphere, in math, in language, wherever. But in respect of languages, we can speak about such categories that we describe. If it is quantity, the category of quantity, then we speak about unity, plurality, the totality. Then we speak about something general, about some parts, or about some singularity. Then quality we can describe. So that is about then adjectives, yeah, and adverbs. So we have affirmative, negative, infinitive. It's about the sentences. And we speak about reality, objection, or restriction. So very useful, yeah, so to know philosophy and to know the categories in order generally to understand the relations, how everything works, relations between everything and people as well. Yes, you see, between in communication. So attitude, categorical, hypothetical, dividing, and we speak about property and independent existence, causality and dependence, and communication. And modality, that is problematic, assertive, apodictic, and possibility, impossibility, existence, non-existence, necessity, coincidence. So these everything, these all categories, they describe everything, and the language as well. According to these categories, we classify the parts of speech, the members of the sentence, everything. So knowing them is better. And so then in the 19th century, with when Panini's grammar was found, the atomistic analysis, that is, we put into parts and compare things, was used, and we speak about the comparative sciences and comparative grammar as well. Well, comparing sounds, we could, yeah, about phonetics here, we could speak already. as the separate discipline, and the absence of general perspective, nevertheless. So they compared things, and that's all. You see, they compared, okay, they found some similarities, some differences, and that's all. So they compared for example, German language and Sanskrit, yeah, and found some regularities, yeah. But then, once they have this general prospection, so then we have this picture of languages, and it appeared that all languages composing Indo-European group, they arrived, yeah, so they originated from Sanskrit in old Indo-European, pre-Indo-European language, and they then developed into branches. So that is, the tree was used, it's very popular because at that period of time, this metaphor was very popular. Well, nowadays language is not viewed as a tree. So we can, yes, to some degree describe the language as a tree, because we speak about some derivatives and so on, the roots, yeah, a little bit. So when we speak about the structure, but nevertheless, nowadays we use the term system, not a tree. And Henry Sweet's New English Grammar, it was the first historical grammar. Okay, so you see, in the 19th century, I mean historical in which respect? In respect of scientific. You see, it was scientific grammar. Here it is written for you. So that is the importance, because he described meanings, forms, functions, different phenomena, and still this classification is used by some grammarians as the basis for given prescription of the rules. So practical grammars, some of them are based on these rules. Well, and yeah, Baudouin de Courtenay is the first scholar of the 19th century who started speaking about units of language, and it was the morpheme who gave the description of the morpheme as the meaningful functional unit. It is unit, it's not a sign, because phonemes, they are signs, they have form, but they don't have meaning. And then everything started, the grammar and so on. So we will speak about the theoretical grammar now, yes, already, and theoretical phonetics, because we have already known the history of the language itself and how it appeared that we should speak about them differently. It is starting with Baudouin de Courtenay, and then we'll speak with you about other scientists. So we have come to this point where we can speak about now the theoretical grammar separately and theoretical phonetics separately as branches of linguistics and language as the system. Well, thank you for your attention. See you during the seminar. Wish you have a nice day. And yes, goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.